All right. Hello to all of our wonderful listeners and viewers. We are back with Real Talk and we're abandoning the episode numbers.
Yes, we are.
Or we'll just always say it's episode 38.
Yeah.
But we are so excited to have Erin Sims back with us. Thank you, Erin. For those of y'all
Hi.
who are our listeners, y'all remember we've had Erin on talking about advocacy and also talking about 988 Day, and she is our amazing director of advocacy and outreach at Via Link. So today, as y'all have probably guessed by the episode title, we are going to be talking about secure storage and suicide prevention. So I just want to make a couple of quick content warnings. First, for our listeners, we are going to be having some real talk about firearms and suicide prevention, which will include some talk and data on suicide attempts and suicide death. So if this information is not helpful to your wellness, please feel free to skip this episode and catch up with us for the next one. And we would also like to clarify that we are not going to be talking about the subject of gun ownership or Second Amendment rights. We are all in support of the Second Amendment. We are going to be having a frank discussion about suicide risk as it comes to firearms and preventative measures that we can take when it comes to firearms as suicide attempt methods, and also looking at firearms as the cause of accidental death and that type of prevention. Um, just a little bit of background data. Firearms are the leading cause of suicide death, which is important to keep in mind as they're not necessarily the number one attempt method. Many, in fact, most attempts do not result in death. But tragically, the death rate is far too high. Anything more than zero deaths is, of course, way too many. But firearm attempts are the most lethal form of attempt. They have an approximate 98% mortality rate as a suicide attempt method. So that is why, with all of us here working in suicide prevention, this is a subject that is very important to us. But we'll try and keep it real. We'll also keep it light as we do. We are delighted, as always, to have, again, our Director of Advocacy and Outreach, Erin Sims, with us. So she's going to be talking with us today about secure storage, about self surrender options, and a child access prevention bill, which has been filed in Louisiana during our legislative session this year. So, quick reminder, if you want to go back and listen to our virtual reality episode, that was when we really discussed some secure storage training that we had, our fun VR headset training. So please go back and listen to that if you'd also like some more background on the specifics of secure storage. But that was a long intro. Thank you so much for being with us, Erin.
Thank y'all for having me back. I'm glad to be back with you and Jesse today.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming back on. Erin, before we dive into the main topic of the episode, could you give us a quick review of your clinical career and how you found yourself working in advocacy?
Yeah, for sure. I am a licensed professional counselor and I worked in schools directly with students and their families, with teachers providing mental health support to students in New Orleans for about a decade. And I started my advocacy work while I was doing work in schools. A lot of the issues that the kids that I was working with at schools really started outside of the classroom. And so sometimes as a school counselor, I'd be very frustrated with some of the more systemic barriers to kids' success, the things that were causing them to struggle at school. And so that led me to just look more outside the classroom and the school building and get involved with more school-based mental health efforts at the state level. That's how I met Sherrod, and some of the different coalitions around the state to talk about the need for more mental health supports in schools, but also just more supports for young people to thrive in their communities so that they can be excited to even come to school. And so I was really passionate about that and kind of pivoted into advocacy that way. I think advocacy is really similar to social work and counseling, just like on the macro level. And so it's a way to still work with people, but also work with policy and legislation and coalition building, which is something that I really like. And then Just as Sharon said, suicide prevention and helping restrict access to deadly weapons in the moment of crisis go hand in hand, in my opinion. You cannot be an advocate for suicide prevention and not know about how lethal firearms are. So, as I got more into this career, I just learned more about guns and mental health, and that kind of led me to where I'm at now with advocacy for the cap law.
Oh, wow, nice.
So much, Erin. And yeah, Erin and I did meet before she started working at Via Link, and we facilitated the school-based mental health work group together. Really, I think I just like said you're co-facilitating it with me now because you were doing half or more of the work, and we'd see each other
So,
at the Capitol all the time. And I remember just telling LaVondra, I was like, we need her. So let's figure that
happy to
out.
be part of the team at Link and all the
Well,
great work that they do.
we are so thrilled to have an advocacy director now. So we've mentioned the CAP law. CAP, we'll just probably call it CAP from now on. That stands for Child Access Prevention Law. So can you talk us through how the CAP law working group came to be and how you became involved in it and what the purpose of a CAP law is?
Yes, I'm gonna get my booklet too. Sorry, y'all. I have like a little booklet on our bill. Just to have it. So yeah, the cap law advocacy in Louisiana starts way before my time in advocacy. One of the people that's actually in our coalition group, Ashlyn, is a mom who lost her son to unintentional firearm injury at a friend's house at a sleepover. And so she lost her son in 2011. So she has been advocating for child access prevention, safe storage laws. Sometimes people use those terms interchangeably. The law that I'll be talking about is more a child access prevention law than a safe storage law. But yeah, there's been so many people that have been advocating for this for a really long time. And so those people, have kind of came and gone at the legislature because the issue will become popular to talk about, but it's never really had any success in Louisiana in actually becoming a policy. And so this group that I'm working in right now, which includes advocates, like I said, who have been working on this for decades at this point in time, it really stemmed from the police department in New Orleans not being able to make charges in certain instances where kids were injured due to getting a firearm because an adult had not secured it properly. And so the New Orleans Police Department kind of went to the health department and said, what can we do about this? Like, I think there was 11 cases that they had where no charges could be brought. And so that kind of reignited the fire around the cap law discussion. We brought the bill last year and it did not pass out of the House floor, but it did pass out of committee. So there was just still interest, and the coalition is still pretty strong, full of people that are still doing this work. So we decided to bring the law back again this year, but it includes a lot of partners, the United Way, Via Link, health departments from across the state, some of our sheriffs, lots of moms, tons of moms. And then, of course, doctors. One of the things that I think's been so great about the advocacy this year is we've been able to have a neurosurgeon, Dr. Plouffe, from the hospital in Baton Rouge, who is a children's neurosurgeon. So she's the person who is the first responder when kids come in with any type of traumatic brain injury. And most often we know that firearms can cause traumatic brain injury. So she's someone who not only sees kids whose life end from unintentional injury or suicide, but also kids who are left with devastating injuries for the rest of their life when they survive these types of things. So I think that's something we don't talk as much about is that there's kids that get a hold of guns and accidentally injure themselves, but they live. And there is long-term implications for them and their caregivers. And it can be really just again like another horrible aspect of just what can happen when when weapons aren't secured storely in a secured store. It's hard to say secured store. Oh my gosh, I can't say it. Stored securely in a home.
And that is a really good point. Thank you, Erin, for bringing that up. I hadn't even really so much thought about, which of course I should have, that yeah, the tragedy that can be the loss of life is not the only,
Right,
implication and only tragedy that can come from accidental, gun discharge or even purposeful.
Right.
totally.
And so when we're talking about firearms and secure storage, we're not talking about removing anyone's guns. We're talking about storing them safely. Sharon and Aaron, you both took the VR class. Could y'all review the basics of secure storage for us?
I think so.
Yeah,
I
sure.
I like to break it down really simple and say it's like a four-parter where it's like that your firearm should be unloaded and it should have the safety on. The firearm should be locked, and then separate from the firearm should be the ammunition for the firearm, and that should also be locked behind something else. So you're unloaded, your safety on, firearm locked away. Separate from that, the ammunition is locked away.
Yeah, definitely. That's the way that I feel like the training kind of teaches you in a best way, like a best practice is that like it's not just putting a loaded weapon in a locked box, but really taking the time to make sure that you follow through the steps of storing it in a secure way. Because, like Sharon said, if the ammunition's laying right next to the gun in the box, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's safe. That's still
Right.
easily accessible. So, yeah, we know that these types of laws are responsible gun ownership, and most all hunting courses and gun safety courses discuss aspects of secure storage. It's kind of principle of gun safety is not just knowing how to shoot a gun, but how to keep it stored safely so that someone doesn't injure themselves, so that you don't injure yourself. That's kind of one of the pillars of gun safety is knowing how to store your gun.
And I thought they put it in a really good perspective. Erin and I also did a training with Walk the Talk America, which is an advocacy group for gun owners and incorporating that into mental health, just how we better talk about secure storage, how we better talk about gun ownership when we are also working in the mental health field. And the leader of that group was really saying, and he is a gun owner, and that he was like, I hear people where they say that they have their gun for their protection and that they're afraid doing all of those steps, they couldn't get to their gun in an emergency. And he put it in the perspective of just as often as you are practicing your aim and practicing your target shooting, you should be practicing how you can unlock your gun and get to it in case of an emergency. And I thought that was a good perspective. Full disclosure, I am not a gun owner myself, but and know many people that are. But I thought that was an interesting perspective to think of it that way.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting because it makes sense, if you question it, then if you're practicing, like you said, then it makes sense to kind of practice, okay, this is here, this is, this other stuff is here. So how can I do both? How can I get to both in an emergency situation as fast as I can? So that definitely makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it's similar to me how like when you're a kid, you learn about like fire evacuation. Like you put your hand on the door. Is it hot? Like there's not just, you don't just throw open the door and run out in
Right.
a fire. We learn steps, we learn protocols, like we learn simple ways in an emergency or in any type of situation, a way to behave that will help us know what to do if that really happens. So to Sharon's point, we learn that about a lot of different situations in our life. That's why we do fire drills. That's why we talk about that, how you might think, oh, even on a plane, we learn safety steps because there is an order of operation to anything like that, for
Right.
keeping you safe, with whenever a situation has a high level of pressure or risk. That's just kind of what we want to be doing in all those types of situations, I think.
I love that
Right.
order of operations. That's a good way to put it.
Mhm.
So pivoting kind of back to the legislative standpoint. So from a legal or legislative view, why is something like a cap law so important?
Yeah, I think it's the most important thing that a cap law does is get out awareness, and it seeks to be preventative, right? It's not seeking to, like you said, one, it's not seeking to take people's guns away, but it's also not seeking to put people in jail. The crime that or the time sentencing is 6 months or less. The fine is $1,000 or less, and most states have very low fines or jail time associated with them because it's similar to uh, a ticket you might get for your seatbelt not being fastened, or like not having enough life vest on a boat. It's very similar to that. It's a life-saving device. A gun, storing your gun is a life-saving device. You can think of that storage as that way. And so similarly to these other things, medicine cabinets being out of the reach of kids, car seat belts, all those types of things. We don't have laws around those types of objects to be criminalizing or punitive, but to be creating awareness. Oh, I need to do this. If I don't, there's some type of outcome. We have a lack of education. That's another reason why I think sometimes creating policies can help broaden education. We have a really big hunting culture in Louisiana. We're called the sportsman's paradise. And I think that's something that's celebrated, but also we can balance that celebration and that culture that we have with behaviors that keep people safe. In Louisiana, we have the highest rate of unintentional gun injury by children, and guns are the number one leading cause of child death in our country. So if we know all of that, then we know that we might need some laws to keep kids safer if they're dying from something like guns way more than anything else, even car accidents. So we know that in the past, when we have added safety precautions to cars, to boating, to medicine, we see kids become safer. We see less death. And in homes where guns are stored safely, that evidence is overwhelming. I mean, we're talking 75 to 80% less of a chance of unintentional injury or suicide in a home where we're just locking those weapons up when we have a minor. So again, the data shows overwhelmingly across all studies that when we reduce access to guns, kids are safer. And that is what we're seeking to do with the law and what we hope the law does. We have a problem in Louisiana. We're losing more kids here to this issue. And so I think our coalition says we can do better than what we're doing right now. We know we can. And this is something that's proven to do better than what we're doing right now in other states. And that's all we hope, is that we see those same outcomes here.
And I think it's important, as you mentioned, Erin, like Louisiana being sportsman's paradise and that being celebrated. And the law is very clear, or the act, should I say, that no, bill, that's the word I'm looking for, that this in no way means that a minor cannot use a firearm. Of course, parents can let their child go use a firearm to go hunting, to go
Yeah.
practice shooting,
We want
etc.
kids
That
to
is,
have that education.
yes.
We want kids to have gun education and to have safe storage. It doesn't really, it's not this or that or but, you have, or it's a and that we can have both of those things. One of the things that I think is really pointing into what you said is that like Ashlyn, Noah, her son who passed away, he was a hunter. He was someone who had taken many hunting courses, but that didn't keep him safe because his friend that he was staying at his house, his friend wasn't. So even if a kid, whenever, one of the things that I think is very powerful is that when Ashlyn says that when they did the investigation, his DNA and his fingerprints were on none of the weapons. He knew not to touch weapons, and that still didn't keep him safe. So it's not enough to have education. Studies have also shown repeatedly that no matter what level education kids have around guns, they will still touch guns. They will still pick them up. They will still be curious about them. That is the nature of a child. And instead of just, for us to try to correct that nature, it's a lot easier for us to be adults and be responsible and make a safer environment for them than to hope and pray that they've been educated enough to not be vulnerable when the time comes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense. And what are some resources for someone if they find themselves in a place where they are worried about themselves or someone in their house?
There's is resources in Louisiana that allow you to store your gun outside of the home if you feel like you need to get your gun or maybe a loved one's gun outside of the home. That can be a hard conversation. So I definitely, suggest getting support in that conversation if you want to, or if you even feel comfortable. We have resources like the Armory Project, which partners with local gun shops to allow you to store your gun at a local gun shop, no questions asked, free of charge. I don't think that most they don't have time limits either on it, I don't believe. But just to allow you to store your gun safely outside of your home, that is an option. There's other programs that do the same. Armory Project is just one we have a close relationship to. There's also different programs if you live in Orleans or Jefferson, the health department and Manning's Family Children Hospital. They also pass out. You can go to Manning Children's website, and they have like an online form that you can fill out, and they'll actually deliver the biometric gun safe to you, which is the kind with the fingerprints on the side. It's not like a traditional cable lock, which some people, many people prefer many different methods to store their weapons. So it's good to have access to a lot. But, there's not enough resources for this. There is, these different organizations that have created different pots of money, kind of like the ones I just talked about. But overall, it's something that we definitely need more access to I'm sure, I know Louisiana, but I'm sure nationwide too.
Right.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, we think, with V-Link being a 988 center, that it's like a wonderful partnership with the Armory Project. All of our contact center specialists who work on 988 have actually had like an informative presentation by representatives from the Armory Project. We have all of the locations listed within our referral database and our resource database, which you can find online at vialink.org. And we will also link the Armory Project's website in this episode. It's a really great um, project to look into because I think their concept, of self-surrender originally started that you went to a police department and they just realized like this isn't working. People are afraid they'll be criminalized or they may not get their firearm back, understandably. So the innovation of partnering with gun shops was really great. And Erin and I have actually had the privilege of doing a lot of outreach on behalf of 988 with gun shops who are a part of the Armory Project. And I would say, like, we found that to be an intimidating space because we are not gun owners, and everyone we have interacted with has been so lovely. They want to talk, they want to have dialogue, they want to learn more about 988. They all have 988 cards, wristbands, all of those things at their gun shop. Some are even coordinating with us to get suicide response training for their staff. Like, it is a perfect merriment. So I think we really want to stress that suicide prevention and secure storage and supporting gun owners go together. As Erin said, it's an and, it's not an or. And just a reminder, if you are ever struggling, that 988 is available 24 hours a day. We are never going to tell you what to do. We are never going to judge anything you're going through. 988 is there to listen to you and help you figure out what's going to work best to keep you safe or to keep you feeling like you can breathe through what you're experiencing. So never hesitate. Call or text 988. That was a rhyme. I didn't even really mean to do it. And I enjoyed it.
And
So
98 can, like Sharon said, point you back to those resources too for the secure store, like the safe storage. If there is access to that, I know that we have it in our V-Link database, the programs that I just talked about, where you can contact and get the gun safes if you live in New Orleans. Um, but yeah, I think we know that in moments of crisis, guns make things deadly. In moments of domestic dispute, guns can make things deadly. So we know that it's good to maybe have space from, a gun whenever a person is having a mental health issue, or we need to take extra considerations when we know we have young people in our home or people who are struggling with their mental health. That's something we just need to be aware of. And so I think educating the public more about that. There's also a piece of legislation this session that's working its way through the legislature. It hasn't made it to the final process of becoming a law in Louisiana, but it would create a registry where people could self-select to not be able to buy a gun in Louisiana. So there are certain around like gambling addiction, you can put yourself on a list to not be allowed in casinos, as a preventative method to not have the push to know that you can't be let in. It's similar to that you would be able to just voluntarily put your name on a list to not be able to purchase a gun if you wanted to do that. And so that's a piece of legislation that I know American Foundation for Suicide Prevention has proposed this session. And so that's just, another just bit of information, I think, about some of the things that people are thinking about in the state to try to give people different pathways to keep them safe in have one like autonomy to do what they need to do and to not be, like you said, told what to do, but also be able to make the choice for themselves to stay safe or keep their loved ones safe.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And we've touched on this a little bit, but I think it's, an interesting program we have in Louisiana that I know we both participate, Erin, which is our child death review panels, which is a program through the Louisiana Office of Public Health, where we have the statewide child death review program. And then that is also split up regionally within our behavioral health regions in Louisiana, where essentially it is a panel of individuals cross sector in their expertise and careers, where you are reviewing any accidental deaths, so nothing caused by medical reasons or things like that, of children under the age of 15. And it is always tragic. Those are tough meetings to go through, but I do think they are important. But we pretty consistently see accidental and intentional self-inflicted gunshot deaths in our youth in these panels. In your opinion, Erin, what do you think might be limiting some families from securely storing their firearms or being able to securely store them? And what is your best recommendation for someone who is looking for maybe a resource or information?
Yeah, so I think that it's cost prohibitive a lot of times is what, a biometric gun safe can cost over 100 and something dollars. So I think one thing that we hear from a lot of people is just that like cost can be restrictive. If you own multiple guns, it can be restrictive. I think again, going back to education around the risk and how high the risk is, like you said, if a suicide is involved, I'm sorry, if a firearm is involved in a suicide, it becomes 98% fatal. I mean, like that's something that I think if people knew or more people understood, a lot of times parents who discuss children, or if you read stories, this advocacy work, I've read a lot about obviously families that have been in this situation and just most of the parents discuss how they obviously knew that the weapon was dangerous, but they didn't understand how easily their kid knew where it was, or they didn't really understand that their kid knew how to take the safety off or where they didn't know all of that. So I think that goes back to awareness, that goes back to education. Everyone loves their kid and wants to keep them safe. This is every parent's worst nightmare, and some people's real lived nightmare every day because it's happened to them. And I think that they want people to know, one, just how deadly this is and to take it more seriously, that it's okay to love to hunt. It's okay to have this culture that we have, but to also take seriously life and, are the care that we have to others, our responsibility to others and to children in our society. Because, a lot of people are just running into the store and the gun is left in the car and the child was in the car. And a lot of that, again, just goes back to our habits and the way that we take things seriously. And so I think that's a culture shift that happens from education. And again, I don't think people should be scared or shamed. I think that when that comes into play, that's what creates divisiveness. That there can just be obviously a lot of shame around this issue, that's stigmatizing them. So, without judgment and without blame, just educating people that, if a kid gets a hold of a gun in the house and there's a high likelihood they could hurt themselves or someone else. And then we also know too, school shootings, overwhelmingly those guns, when kids leave the home and commit some type of act of violence that is to a broader community, overwhelmingly, like I think it's like 75 to 80% of the time, it's an unlocked weapon in their home is how they get that gun to commit that crime. So it's not just the people who hunt. It's not just the people who would never own a gun. It's all of us that can be
Right.
impacted whenever weapons are just easily accessible. And we have more weapons in society at any other point in time. I think that sometimes comes up in the argument is like, why do we need this now? Or why do we see so many deaths from guns? Because we have more guns available right now to us than ever before. And if we have increased the rate at which we own guns, but not increased the rate that we take it seriously to be educated or store them, then we're going to be at an imbalance there. And we're going to have more guns out there and less educated people about it than we did at a time when less people owned guns and it might not have been as common. And guns also didn't work the same way. We have a plethora of types of guns that are available. And now people can even make guns at their home with 3D printing. There's all these types of things that come into play in this new world. And I think that like knowledge is power, and parents can feel more empowered, I think, and more confident when they educate themselves on this. So I think money around awareness and education, and then also coupling that with laws, is a great way to begin to have a little bit better culture around gun safety in Louisiana that still allows us to have our culture, like have our normal, hunting culture and the things that we feel like are part of our life here.
And I think, like you said, Erin, the kind of stigmatization around mental health is something that is a barrier because, it was a discussion we had about mental health and firearm ownership and like about like that you might have clients that like, activities like hunting with their firearm might be part of their self-care, which is good. But then we also have to know, give enough destigmatization and awareness for someone to know when to say, okay, right now, this is not good for my self care because I could be in a dangerous situation. I mean, as you said, and I said that guns have a 98% mortality rate. To put that into perspective, when you're looking at suicide attempts, with intentional poisoning or intentional overdose, that's like a 5% mortality rate. So it really is quite the difference. And just to encourage parents that these accidents or these intentional self-inflicted gunshots do not happen because a parent never educates their child about gun
Mhm.
safety. It's because children's brains are not fully developed. Their sense of mortality is non-existent when your prefrontal cortex is not developed. And that's not developed between until 26 to 30 years old, depending on your age and things like that. So I just want to make sure that we're making, just stating that as well, that you can do all that you can to be an amazing tutor on gun safety and education. These are still young folks whose brains do not understand fully what mortality means. And that's why that step of secure storage is so important.
And our kids are not with us all the time. I think this is, whenever I met Ashlyn, she talked about how that she had never thought to ask people before she let her child go to their home, do you own a gun? And I thought, neither have I. That's what I said to her, Ashlyn, I've never asked my son's friends that. And I've let him spend the night at people's homes. I've let him be with all of my family, my in-law, and I've never asked that question, but it has changed me fundamentally. And I have asked that question now, and even the other day I was talking to a friend and we were talking about both of our sons going somewhere. And she said, and we had never talked about this topic, she said, I wonder if they have guns there because it's a little bit further out in the country. And so again, it's something that we just do not talk about. Even being immersed in this work, I had never thought to talk about that, but to not feel judged by that, to be able to talk about these things just because they are a part of our life. And, it can be really stigmatizing, but we know a way to break stigma down is to talk about things and to be more comfortable in having discussions and understanding so that we can find the things that we have in common. Because, of course, the thing we have in common is that we want kids to be safe. We want kids to grow up and have, to grow up and reach the potential that we know that they all have and not have things end in tragedy. Um, and like you said, Sharon, there has been, I wish I had the citations. Study after study have shown when no matter how much education a young person has, if you leave them in a room and say, I'll be back in a few minutes, most of the time, like there's been studies that have shown that like the kids can find hidden guns in rooms. Like if you say, hey, just be in this room and let kids be in the room, studies have shown that they will be able to find a hidden gun most of the time, like thinking, oh, they'll never look there. And then also that when they find the gun, they touch it, even though they know they're not supposed to. So I don't know if y'all have like show notes, but I can find the studies. We have them in our CAP research. But just showing that, like you said, that's just not how kids work. The same way that you might say with a big candy bowl, I'm about to leave the room for 3 minutes. Don't touch that candy till I come back. The pull to not just grab the one M&M. kids are going to do it. Like it's just how their brain works, it's how their impulses control lacks, it's all of those things. So they don't have the ability to see through what's going to happen and to understand the long-term consequences, and their curiosity gets the best of them. And that is something that I think as adults, when we know that, that empowers me to feel like we can do something. Like I feel like, again, all of these things tell us that we can do something to help kids, and we know that this works when we store guns safely, that kids do not gain access to them.
All right. I definitely agree with that. And what would you recommend for anyone who would like to get more involved in advocacy or any topic or learn more about legislations and laws?
Yeah, I think that depending on what issue you're interested in, there is like a coalition or group for you. The Suicide Prevention Collaborative at the state level, I help lead Region 1, Sherrard in Region 9, and we're trying to get Region 2 off the ground, which is Baton Rouge. So the statewide collaborative is a great place to start. This group, we don't really have like, I mean, they can always email me. We don't have necessarily a contact touch point for this group. But the state collaborative, we do have a way that you can sign up to get the policy newsletter. And it is a way to stay up to date on legislation around suicide prevention, the cap law that I discussed, the other law for the self-identification to not be sold a gun. That is all being tracked in our legislation. But there is a coalition for everything. Like I said, there is, an anti-homelessness coalition, food insecurity, anything you can think of. Me and Sharon also do the school-based mental health work group to get plugged in and find out kind of what people are already doing. I think that's a great place. Is like find out who's already doing what. You can also always track legislation on the Louisiana legislative website. It can be kind of hard to navigate, but it is a great place to go look up bills. The cap law that I've been talking about is Rep. Cox out of Gretna, and it's HB 586. That is still not scheduled, but when it does, we will be sending alerts out through the policy newsletter that I said is where people can sign up. That's a way to stay up to date there.
Perfect. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah.
Yes, and we will be linking all of this information in the episode description. I'll throw my email address in there in case you would like to learn more or get in touch with the collaborative or get signed up for the policy newsletter. Erin does an amazing job with tracking. I don't know how she stays so organized. It makes my head hurt looking at it, which is why she is the advocacy director and I am not. But I am so appreciative, Erin, for you even being able to carve out some time for us because you are so busy since session is in session, so to speak. So we're really, really appreciative. This is a really important topic. It's not always one that's the most comfortable to talk about. So I really appreciate you coming on with us and, of course, everything you do for ViaLink.
Well, thank y'all for letting
Yeah,
me come on
thank
and talk
you.
about it. And really, if anyone is interested in reaching out or hears this story and it's something they want to talk more about, email Sharon and she'll definitely put you in contact with us.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank y'all.
All right, Jesse, you ready to try this sign off?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, this has been Real Talk with Jesse and Sherrard. No
No
filters,
filters,
no
no
fluff,
fluff, just
just
real.
real talk. Thank y'all.
Thank y'all.